So, welcome to Jumbo IS and welcome to our lecture series called Daily News in Shorts. In this lecture series, we cover a particular day's current affairs in a short span of time in about 20 to 25 minutes. Now, let me explain to you the regimen you should follow. Okay? Look, by watching this lecture series, you would have covered your entire day's current affairs in about 20 to 25 minutes. But the thing is that the job would be only half done. After watching this lecture series in about 20 to 25 minutes, you have to revise this lecture also. And you have to spend another 20 to 25 minutes revising this lecture from the notes that we are going to provide to you. So 20 to 25 minutes of watching this lecture, another 20 to 25 minutes of revising this lecture, and in about 40 to 50 minutes, you would be done for the day as far as current affairs are concerned. Okay, so spend around 40 to 50 minutes daily on a daily basis, and you don't have to worry about current affairs at all for your civil services examination. Now, where can you find our notes? Well, these notes shall be shared on our Telegram channel, and the link to our Telegram channel is provided in the comment section below. So just below this video in the comment section, there is a link to our Telegram channel. You just have to click on that link. It will take you to our Telegram channel, and from there you can download the notes for this lecture and spend 20 to 25 minutes revising them. This lecture series will save a lot of your time. In about 40 to 50 minutes, you would have covered your entire day's current affairs. So follow this lecture series regularly. Make it a daily habit of yours. All right? Okay. So let's begin this lecture. Let's begin our discussion starting with topics for the day. Okay, what topics we are going to focus on this particular lecture. Okay, so there are in total 4 topics that we are going to discuss in today's lecture. Number one among them is India-Italy 5-year action plan. So recently on the sidelines of G20 summit in Brazil, Indian Prime Minister and Italian Prime Minister met and they unveiled a 5-year action plan to improve the relationship of both these countries. So we are going to discuss this. Then Ministry of Heavy Industries has announced that they are going to come out with the guidelines for PM e-drive scheme. Now this PM e-drive scheme actually promotes electric vehicles in our country. So what is this scheme? What other schemes has government unveiled to promote the electric vehicle sector? Okay. Then our third topic would be ATACMS Missiles. Few months back, USA provided these missiles, these very advanced missiles to Ukraine. And recently, USA allowed Ukraine to use them on Russia. Now, just now, Ukraine used these missiles to hit deep into Russian territory. Now, this has raised a lot of controversy and has escalated the Russia-Ukraine conflict. But what we need to focus on is, what are these missiles? What special features do they have? And how this has escalated the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Okay, and in the end, we'll talk about China's emissions paradox. As you all know, climate summit is going on in Baku, Azerbaijan. So climate-related news comes every day. Okay, so today we are going to focus on China. Okay, China's emissions paradox. Okay, China is the biggest contributor of greenhouse gas emissions, but it also serves our fight against climate change. How does China do that? We'll talk about this. Okay, so we'll focus our attention on these 4 topics. Let's start this discussion with topic number 1, which is India-Italy 5-year action plan. Okay, so Prime Minister Narendra Modi and his Italian counterpart Giorgia Meloni announced a 5-year strategic action plan outlining their vision for collaboration in a range of key sectors. Okay, so India and Italy are going to collaborate on multiple sectors. Some of them are defense, trade, energy, space. Now, these two leaders met on the sidelines of G20 summit, which is being held in Brazil, the capital of Brazil, not the capital, but main city of Brazil, Rio. Okay, the name of this action plan is Joint Strategic Action Plan 2025-29. So it's a 5-year action plan. Now, what's the background of India-Italy relationship in recent times? Okay, both these leaders have met quite regularly in recent times. So this meeting was the fifth between these two leaders in the last 2 years. They last met in June 2024 in Puglia, Italy, during G7 summit. Okay. Now, following up on their discussions in their last meeting, Puglia, the two leaders reiterated their commitment to advancing the India-Italy strategic partnership. So remember, India and Italy are strategic partners, just like India and Nigeria are, okay? And announced a joint strategic action plan for the next 5 years. Now, what are the key points of this joint action plan? Okay, we'll take a look at them. So the key points. First of all, cooperation would be on defense. So both these leaders have decided on holding joint defense consultative meetings. So the defense experts of the two countries would meet regularly. Joint staff talks would be on an yearly basis so that both India and Italy can coordinate their and cooperate their defense efforts. Okay. Then definitely economic cooperation, promoting industrial partnerships, technological transfers, centers, mutual investments, especially in automobile industry, semiconductor, for which India is pushing very hard, infrastructure and advanced manufacturing. Then connectivity between the two countries, maritime connectivity, land infrastructure basically would be developed so that you can go to Italy by land using the India Middle East Europe corridor, economic corridor. Okay, this would boost trade between the two countries and people to people contact. Then science and innovation was discussed, space was discussed. Basically, Italian Space Agency and ISRO would cooperate on a lot of technological issues. Then the issue of visas, migration and mobility of Indians, skilled Indians to Italy and skilled Italians to India. Okay. And definitely, because climate summit is going on, so you must discuss climate change. You must discuss energy transition to renewable energy. So strengthen the Global Biofuels Alliance and International Solar Alliance. Okay, so these were the key points in the action plan, the 5-year action plan discussed between India and Italy. You just have to remember that India and Italy are strategic partners. Okay, all right. Now let's quickly shift to topic number 2, which is PME Drive scheme. So the guidelines for giving 2000 crores in incentives under PME Drive scheme to support the installation of stations for electric vehicles. Okay, because you see, electric vehicles are not being readily adopted because there are not many charging stations available. Okay, but government wants to make these charging stations available in every nook and corner of the country, like there are petrol pumps, right? It is only then that people would shift to electric vehicles. So to promote that, to promote installation of charging infrastructure, okay, for charging electric vehicles, government launched PME Drive scheme, and government has decided to issue guidelines for giving 2000 crore as incentives. People would be given incentives, financial, monetary incentives to create charging infrastructure on their land, right? Now, these guidelines will be released by Ministry of Heavy Industries. So remember, this scheme is being implemented by Ministry of Heavy Industries. The ministry will also release detailed guidelines for implementing another scheme, which was meant to boost production of electric cars in India. Okay. Now, this another scheme was launched in March. PME Drive scheme was launched in September this year. Okay. So this PME Drive scheme would boost adoption of electric vehicles. Manufacturing of electric vehicles, for that, a separate scheme was launched in March. We'll talk about this scheme. But first, let's talk about PM E-Drive scheme. So what is this E-Drive scheme? So the full form is PM Electric Drive Revolution in Innovation Vehicle Enhancement Scheme was notified in September, and the total budgetary outlay was 10,900 crores, and the total period for this scheme was 2 years. Now, from this 10,900 crore budget, 2,000 crore would be taken for providing charging infrastructure. Now, this target of providing 2000 crore worth of incentives is twice that of another scheme that wants to boost charging infrastructure. So government had already launched a scheme called FAME 2 scheme. Okay. Under that scheme, 1000 crores of incentives would be provided for making charging infrastructure. Under PME Drive scheme, 2000 crores would be provided. So twice that of FAME 2 scheme. Now, the aim of this scheme is to support approximately 25 lakh electric two-wheelers, 3 lakh electric three-wheelers, and 14,000 electric buses through demand incentives. Okay, basically, financial incentives would be provided if you demand that you want to create a charging infrastructure on your land, charging station on your land. Now, remember a few seconds back, I mentioned another scheme that was launched by government in March that will boost manufacturing of electric vehicles in India. Because if Indians adopt electric vehicles on a large scale, but those electric vehicles are imported from abroad, then that would put a lot of import burden on India. Therefore, India needs to boost local production of electric vehicles. And for that, government launched SMEPCI scheme. The full form is Scheme to Promote Manufacturing of Electric Passenger Cars in India, and it was notified in March 2024. What are the aims of this scheme? Well, to attract foreign investors and domestic investors in e-vehicle space, provide Indian consumers with access to latest technology, boost Make in India initiative, because remember, this scheme boosts domestic manufacturing of electric cars, strengthening the EV ecosystem by promoting healthy competition and reducing import of crude oil and reduce air pollution. So if people are not using petrol diesel cars, well, that will lead to lesser air pollution, that will lead to lesser import burden of crude oil. Okay, now what would this scheme do? It will lower import duties, okay, from car models costing $35,000. Okay, if the manufacturer promises to invest 500 million in setting up a local factory. So if you have to import a vehicle, if you want to import an electric vehicle from abroad, you have to pay an import duty of 100%. But government says that we will reduce this import duty, this tax, to 15% if the manufacturer promises to set up a local factory in India for making these vehicles with a minimum investment of $500 million. So again, this is aimed to boost local manufacturing. All right. So government is promoting or basically efforts in EV sector. All right. Okay. Next are ATACMS missiles and the use of these missiles by Ukraine to hit deep into to hit deep the use of these missiles by Ukraine to hit deep into Russian territory has caused a lot of concern. Okay. Now what has happened basically? Look, USA decided to provide these missiles to Ukraine. These are long range missiles, and the purpose of long range missiles is to hit deep into Russian territory. But USA prohibited Ukraine from using these missiles. USA provided them, but they prohibited them from using them. Okay. But recently, 2 days back, Joe Biden allowed Ukraine to use them also. Because recently reports came that Russia is using North Korean troops to fight the war in Ukraine. So USA said that Russia has escalated this war, so we will also escalate. So USA allowed Ukraine to use these missiles and Ukraine used them. Now, after this, Vladimir Putin, Russia's leader, has announced that he is going to update his nuclear doctrine, basically making threats that he might use nuclear weapon. Okay, so this is what ATACMS missiles is all about. Now, this is the political part or the war-related part of ATACMS missile. We'll talk about the technical details of this missile. So, Ukraine's military used long-range American-made missiles known as Army Tactical Missiles ATACMS to strike into Russia for the first time. This came 2 days after USA allowed Ukraine to use these missiles in the current conflict, a significant reversal of Washington's policy. So earlier, Washington's policy was to stop Ukraine from using these missiles with Russia because that would have escalated. Russia would have gotten angry and would have used more powerful weapons. Okay, but now Washington has reversed its policy. Now, what are these ATACMS missiles? So these missiles are manufactured by Lockheed Martin, a famous defense manufacturer in USA. And these are conventional surface to surface artillery weapon systems capable of striking targets well beyond the range of existing army cannons, rockets, and other missiles. Its maximum range is 300 kilometers. And the special part about ATACMS is that it uses cluster munition. And cluster munition is added to a missile to increase the damage it can cause. So cluster munitions actually cause more damage. Now, what are cluster munitions? Okay, so basically, cluster munitions are small bombs are attached to this big rocket. So as soon as this rocket reaches its target, it opens up, and these small bombs are released and and they are spread around a larger geographical area. Okay, so this is what cluster munitions is. So a cluster of small bombs are released from the rocket itself. This increases the geographical spread of the attack. It increases the damage also. So these ATACMS are capable of carrying different forms of cluster munitions. Okay, this is what cluster munitions is. So remember this part. Okay, so this is the definition of cluster munition. We won't go into that because I have just explained it to you. But cluster munitions can be used to disperse or spread around small biological bombs, chemical bombs also. In fact, there is an international convention that bans the use of cluster munition because they cause a lot of damage. Convention on cluster munitions outlaws the use, production, transfer, and stockpiling of these weapons. This convention was adopted in Dublin by 107 countries in 2008 and was signed in Oslo, Norway in 2008. Till date, 123 states have joined this convention. Okay, but important countries have not joined this convention. These important countries are US, Russia, Ukraine, Pakistan, and Israel. So these have not signed this convention. So they say that they are not bound to not use these weapons. So remember, India can also use cluster munitions. India is not a signatory to Convention on Cluster Munitions. All right. And now, last but not the least, China's emission paradox. Now we'll talk about the paradox part of this news. First, let's talk about the curious case of China. Okay. Now, China is the world's second largest economy. Yet, UN classifies China as a developing country, not a country. Okay. Now, you might say that what is there in the name? China is a developing country in name only. But this name, this tag is important because under the current climate change architecture or the climate change rules, it is the obligation of rich countries, rich and developed countries, to reduce emissions at a bigger scale. Okay, and developing countries are provided some flexibilities. So the targets for rich and industrialized countries are high and they are very rigid, whereas for developing countries it's very low and very flexible. The thing is that China is the world's second largest economy. China is also the world's largest greenhouse gas emitter for the last 15 years. 30% of annual global emissions are caused by China. So, China is the biggest polluter of the world. China is also the second largest economy of the world. Yet, China is not bound by international law to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions that aggressively because China is tagged as developing country by UN. Now, this is problematic. Okay, it is said that if China does not reduce its emissions, then we will not achieve our target of preventing global warming by 1.5 degrees Celsius as per the Paris Agreement. If China doesn't do its due. Okay, so it's very important for the entire world that China reduces its greenhouse gas emissions. Okay, you can see China's significance. China needs to reduce its emissions by 66% from current levels by 2030 and by 78% by 2035 if the world really wants to prevent global warming to increase by 1.5 degrees Celsius. Okay, the problem is that the international climate framework applies a differentiated approach. Rigid and strong targets for rich and industrialized countries and flexible targets and low targets for developing world. And China is currently categorized as developing world despite the fact that it has been the largest emitter, polluter for the last 15 years. 30% of global emissions are done by China. Okay? Now, here's the paradox part. Listen carefully. Yes, China has been the number one polluter for the last 15 years. Yes, China contributes 30% of global annual greenhouse gas emissions. But China is also doing a lot to promote transition to renewable energy. In fact, China is doing a lot to promote transition to renewable energy for the entire world, not for just itself. China in its own country added around 300 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity, 300 gigawatts of electricity produced by solar and wind. This is nearly two-thirds of the total amount installed globally. So last year, the total installation of solar and wind energy, two-thirds of that happened in China. To give you an idea, 300 gigawatt of renewable energy is added by China. UK's total capacity, total electricity capacity is 100 gigawatt. So three times UK's total capacity is China's renewable energy. In fact, 38% of global investments in renewable energy sector is done by China. In fact, 80% of global manufacturing of solar panels and 60% of wind turbines is under China's control. So if the entire world, remember, if the entire world wants to transition to solar energy, they need these solar panels, and 80% of them are produced by China and at a very low cost. If the entire world wants to shift to wind energy, 60% of that is with China. The problem is that manufacturing of these solar panels or wind turbines use electricity, they use power, and that power is produced by coal. So now the problem is, and this is the paradox part, if you force China somehow, if you force China to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, right, then China wouldn't get the adequate power to produce these solar panels and wind turbines. And if that doesn't happen, then the world wouldn't be able to shift that quickly to renewable energy. So if you want a quick shift to renewable energy for the entire world, you need to allow China to keep producing solar panels. And even if they produce these solar panels using coal-based electricity, you have to allow them. But if you allow them, then we would definitely exceed our target of 1.5 degrees Celsius. This is the paradox that the world is dealing with, and they don't know how to deal with it. Because if we allow China to do what it is doing right now, well, the world will transition quickly to renewable energy. But if we do that, the world will also exceed its target of global warming. That is the paradox, and that is the problem. All right? Make sense? Yeah. So that is all. That's all we will cover today. We conclude this lecture today. Please, please, please do not forget to revise this lecture. You have spent the 20 to 25 minutes required to watch this lecture. Half job is done. Now complete the remaining half by revising this lecture from our notes. These notes are provided on our Telegram channel. The link to our Telegram channel is provided in the comment section below this video. So make sure you click on that link. Spend the necessary 20 to 25 minutes, because if you won't do that, then you'll definitely forget these current affairs in a matter of couple of days. So if you really want to etch these current affairs for a long in your memory for longer periods of time, if you really want to etch them, consolidate them in your memory for longer periods of time, please spend the necessary 20 to 25 minutes revising them. Okay. On that note, I'll be signing off. Thank you so much, everyone, and I'll see you next time with next day's current affairs. Thank you so much, everyone.